Morley, welcome back. You're looking good after your vacation.
Well, thank you. Great to be back and looking forward to our exchange as always.
Yeah, and pretty soon you'll be able to pronounce iron the proper way, but with
I
a
know,
bit
right?
more practice.
Arn,
Iron,
cross
A-R-N,
between
iron.
A-R-N, a cross between an Irish and an Alabama accent.
So we got some topics and questions I want to knock out today that I think are going to be
Okay.
super helpful. The very first one I want to start with, though, Morley, is I have a client. She just found out she's 10 weeks pregnant, and the
Okay.
very first thing her doctor said to her is, your iron
Um,
is low, you need to go on iron. And I said, no, 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 hold off, let me speak to Morley. Here we are.
right. Very good. So there's three ways to measure iron. There's hemoglobin, there's ferritin, and there's serum iron. Do you know which of those three markers was deemed low?
Only ferritin.
Only ferritin.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very important. Okay. So 80% of the iron is tied up in hemoglobin and myoglobin, 10% is in ferritin, and less than 1% is in serum iron. So when the doctor is focusing on ferritin, you know right out of the blocks they don't understand the totality of the subject matter. And the the fetus that's growing in your client's womb is a parasite. We don't like to think of it that way, but it is.
Mm.
The fetus doesn't become a mammal until it comes outside and breathes oxygen when it's on its own. And right now, it is a parasite. And what's rising in that client's body is a iron hormone called hepcidin. And hepcidin is made principally in the liver, except when you're pregnant, and then it's being made in the placenta because it's got to deal with this parasite.
Yeah.
So when hepcidin is high, it's riding on a seesaw with ferritin. Hepcidin it's really an acute microbial peptide, antimicrobial peptide. But its partner on the seesaw is ferritin. So when hepcidin is high, ferritin is going to be low. And Myra Fields, a famous copper scientist, but she spoke a lot about iron issues. Philip Steer, famous British OBGYN, and David Williams, DM Williams from the States, all spoke eloquently about the fact that in an inflammatory state, especially in pregnancy, ferritin has no relevance or value. It is not a marker to be worried about.
Good.
And so, what your client wants to do is for the first 20 weeks of the pregnancy, they want their hemoglobin to be around as though they're not pregnant. So around 12 and a half. And then starting in week 21 down to 40, the hemoglobin is going to drop off. And it should ideally should go down to between 8.5 and 9.5.
Okay.
And that's the research of Philip Steer, who in 1995 did 150,000 examinations of pregnant women and their children to see the children with the highest APGAR scores, what was the ferritin level of the mother. And what he discovered was between 8.5 and 9.5. The healthiest babies are produced by moms with low hemoglobin
Mm-hmm.
and very likely low ferritin. Got to stop worrying about the ferritin. What your client should be worrying about is what's my copper status? What's my magnesium status? What's my retinol status? Why? Because her practitioner is worrying about iron and vitamin D, which has nothing to do with the baby's development. Copper, magnesium, and retinol are critical for neonatal fetal brain development. and they are the polar opposites of vitamin D and iron. So that's what she should really be worrying about is when is the doctor going to measure my magnesium, copper, and retinol status? And the answer is never.
Yeah, never.
And that's the crisis.
That is reassuring because in the early stages of pregnancy, she also has the nausea, so it's harder to get a few things into her. But again, as
She can't
usual,
make she can't make serotonin fast enough. And in the second trimester, the placenta starts to make the serotonin, and then she'll be fine.
yeah. Well, in the meantime, we're doing the dark chocolate, we're doing the chlorophyll, we're doing the red meats as much as possible as well, and green vegetables. So we're doing our best. But I wanted that to be our first question.
That's great. Good place
So
to start.
now that we understand where the ferritin and the hemoglobin comes in, where do iron infusions come into this? Because it's not uncommon for a pregnant woman to be offered an infusion either.
No. It's tragic. It's a crisis of biblical proportions. I no longer call them iron infusions. I call them iron invasions. And people don't understand what they're doing. The practitioners, most of all. And this misunderstanding that iron is low in a pregnant woman's body is absolutely false. It's a false narrative. And um, there's no iron in breast milk. Really? There's no vitamin D in breast milk. Really? So then why are they pumping the infant formula full of iron in breast milk and vitamin D and iron in the breast milk? Because they're trying to do the antithesis of Mother Nature,
Yeah.
which I think is bloody awful, as you
Simple.
would
Yeah.
like to see. And so, an iron, I've had many clients that got iron infusions when they were pregnant, but two in particular. One was on the East Coast, one was on the West Coast, and both women almost died, and both babies almost died because they got the infusions in the last week of the pregnancy, which is just absurd to think that that's going to have any kind of metabolic impact. And this confusion around um, ferritin. Ferritin is the bad guy,
Yeah.
and doctors don't understand. There's actually 5 different forms of ferritin, and the only one that the doctor knows about is serum ferritin, which is the least important, has no relevance to pregnancy, and it's empty shotgun shells. And so it really grieves me to hear stories about women getting these invasions, these iron invasions, when they're completely unwarranted. And to me, it's malpractice. It's absolute malpractice. It's Mother Nature malpractice. It may be clinically accepted, but Mother Nature is violated by that act.
Well, we see it when women are having these big adverse reactions, regardless of pregnancy or not. The average person, woman or man, should not be getting a dump of iron into the body. We're trying to optimize how we're using our own iron.
That's right. And that's exactly right. And the what happens in the last trimester of the pregnancy, the two notable downloads that take place is the fetus gets a download of copper and a download of iron. The download of copper is around 70 milligrams of copper. You and I, as adults, have 100 milligrams. So the fetus is getting 70% of the iron, 70% of the copper they're supposed to carry as an adult.
Mm.
And then the iron is around 350 milligrams. So it's 5 times more iron than copper. But it's happening in the third trimester. And it's happening when hemodilution is taking place. The fluid volume is building. The hemoglobin is relatively speaking dropping, going from 12 and a half down to 8 and a half. And the object is to allow the mother to make breast milk. Women can't make breast milk if they're swimming in iron. Again, Mother Nature knows a thing or two. And so that's what's confusing people is they've been brainwashed into thinking they need iron when in fact they need copper, magnesium, and retinol. Period. Stop this browbeating around low ferritin needing more iron. It's just not true.
I see a rabbit hole there, Morley, but we're not going down it because there's a lot of money in breasts in baby formula. So
No kidding, right?
yeah.
So that the infant formula has 40 times more iron than breast milk. 40 times more iron. So picture your room that you're in right now, and suddenly 40 ninja warriors come into your room. How would you feel if that happened?
I'd say, hold on, I'm too tired for this. Come back tomorrow.
Yeah. No, but that's the problem is the breast milk is being inundated with iron ninja warriors in the breast formula.
Makes you
In the
wonder
infant formula.
why they're doing that.
I'm not going there.
Yeah, I know that's that rabbit hole. So we're this is a big dump of iron we're talking about being put into the bloods. So where does hemochromatosis fall into this, Morley, for people who have hemochromatosis, which is high iron according to their bloods?
Right. So I had two other clients who got iron invasions who did not have hemochromatosis before their iron invasions, and now they both have hemochromatosis, which is a sin. And what hemochromatosis does is we're back to this hepcidin marker again. Hemochromatosis is a genetic alteration that downregulates the production of hepcidin. And what that allows is accumulation of iron in the tissue. And so people with hemochromatosis, very often they need to do weekly phlebotomies. They have so much iron accumulating in their system. There's different variations. There's two classical forms of hemochromatosis, but there are probably a handful of variants. But hemochromatosis is more prevalent in Northern European people of Northern European descent. People from Ireland have a lot of hemochromatosis, very common. Part of the reason being that there's very little copper in Ireland. The peat does not have copper in it. And so the people burning the peat in their fireplace are not doing themselves any favors. There's no copper in Guinness.
Full of iron though.
Full of iron, that's right. And so people with hemochromatosis also typically have red hair. A lot of redheads in Ireland.
What about
Well,
this though, Morley? Let me put this to you as well, because this is something I believe is highly implicated. A lot of people in Ireland have hypothyroidism. It's very prevalent in Ireland.
okay.
Um, and we spoke before about the implication of thyroid function in the management of iron in the body.
So people with hypothyroid, low thyroid function, have low retinol in their diet. The the process of making the T4 requires the thyroxine receptor to hook up with RXR, which is a nuclear receptor that's a derivative of retinol. So RXR needs to hook up with TR, and then they work together to stimulate what's called the promoter region of the gene to produce thyroxine as a substance. The breakdown is people are eating a low-fat diet. They're afraid of the sources of retinol, butter, heavy cream, right? Beef liver, cod liver oil would be among the most rich sources of retinol. And they, because they don't have it in their diet, they can't produce it in their body. It's a natural breakdown of retinol, turns into retinoic acids, turns into nuclear receptors, turns into other retinoids. They're very, very important in human physiology. But if you don't have the food in your diet, you can't produce the receptors. And that's the breakdown. And copper's a part of this equation as well. And when people have low thyroid function, they typically have increased cholesterol synthesis.
Yeah.
And so it's all tied together. And when copper is low, cholesterol, the ability to activate oxygen to make energy is reduced. The body knows that, and it makes cholesterol to capture the oxygen. Cholesterol is an oxygen sink, takes 11 molecules of oxygen to make 1 molecule of cholesterol. And so cholesterol is rising, can't make the T4, and then they get put on medication because the practitioner doesn't understand the natural function and rhythm of the thyroid.
And everything else.
And everything else.
So let's stick with this hemochromatosis for a minute, because there's someone I am considering who recently got a diagnosis of it, and she is definitely estrogen dominant. So how does excess estrogen and birth control influence not just the hemochromatosis, but the iron recycling?
So all of the steroid hormones are reacting to the state of oxygen in the body. Adrenaline, cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. They're all trying to sense what's going on with oxygen. If copper's low, oxygen is more reactive. Then the need for more estrogen, because when copper is low, ceruloplasmin is low, and the body always has a backup plan. Estrogen is plan B for a low ceruloplasmin body. Estrogen is an antioxidant. It's going to neutralize the oxidative stress that's building in the low copper body. And that rise of estrogen is going to wreak havoc in the physiology of the body. Because if copper's low, ceruloplasmin's low, estrogen is going to be elevated, and iron is going to be elevated. Well, what do estrogen and iron like to do? Grow things. And that's where all
break stuff down as well.
Right. And that's what's that? Say that again.
So it breaks stuff down as well in the aspect of rusting things and making it brittle and inflamed.
That's right. And so that's where all the fibroids and all the growths come from, is iron interacting with estrogen.
Yeah. So I know your answer, but I'm just going to ask you. So copper then is a viable tool for helping women metabolize and detoxify estrogen if they have an excess.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's going to mitigate the pressure of the body to make estrogen in response to the oxidative stress. We live in a world that is completely deprived of understanding ceruloplasmin, completely unaware of the 9 enzyme functions of ceruloplasmin, completely unaware of the 15 different elements that ceruloplasmin can work with. Iron is just one of them. There's 14 other elements that ceruloplasmin can work with. And so out of sight, out of mind. If I don't know about ceruloplasmin, if I don't know what it does, I'm okay. No, you're not okay, but you're going to get by. And the tragedy is your doctor should know this, and they don't. That's where the real breakdown is.
So would it be a case then as well that the higher or more prevalent the estrogen or estrogen dominance, the more copper you need?
I think the higher the estrogen, the more efforts you need to engage in to bring homeostasis to the body. You do need more copper. You need more magnesium. You need to be able to produce more progesterone. You need less iron. You need less estrogen, and you need more ceruloplasmin. And those are just half a dozen factors that people need to be thinking about, which is a tad overwhelming. But estrogen dominance, and what goes with estrogen dominance very often is adrenaline dominance.
Yeah.
They tend to go hand in hand. Again, a body that is struggling with oxidative stress doesn't have the copper dependent antioxidant enzymes is going to be more prone to produce estrogen, more prone to produce adrenaline to respond to that sympathetic state. And I don't think it's complicated, but apparently it's a big deal. And most people can't seem to follow the logic of it. But it's like the two minerals that are the most abused in society are magnesium and copper. And people don't realize that under acute stress, we lose magnesium. And under chronic stress, we lose copper. So maybe we should focus there first and get people to restore those minerals along with other factors to keep their body in balance.
You know, you mentioned magnesium there, which is something I wanted to discuss with you. Dr. Mildred Seelig, I'm sure you've heard her, recommends 5 milligrams per pound body weight, puts me at 700 milligrams a day, which is not bad. It's what I get, but I actually need more. I have a high burn rate. So, how important do you feel magnesium is? And considering the burn rate of most people nowadays, I was going to say whether or not they realize it, but I don't think most people even know what burn rate is.
No, they don't. I don't know. I think more and more people are learning about the magnesium burn rate. But her formula was 10 milligrams per kilo. I'm the guy that turned it into 5 milligrams per pound. So I took her genius and made it American so that people could understand it. And that's before we get to the real stress. That's just steady state. You need 5 milligrams per pound body weight. If you know you're going into a storm, you got to increase your uptake.
Yeah.
Then we come to make sure you're taking the right forms of magnesium. But I think the catch is I started out focusing on magnesium, as you know, and it took me about 5 years to realize, wait a minute, why does magnesium keep leaving the body? Because of oxidative stress. Where is the oxidative stress come from? The iron. Iron is interacting with oxygen to create, we should call it oxygen stress, because as soon as we call it oxidative stress, we think it's from another star cluster. It's not. It's right here, it's inside our body. So when we have stress in our world, we have oxidative stress in our body. And why is the oxidative stress not being reduced? Because the antioxidant enzymes are copper dependent. The mechanism to activate oxygen to make energy, copper dependent. The mechanism to prevent the runaway behavior of iron, copper dependent. It's called ferroxidase. And so you've got that kind of oxidative stress, it stimulates what are cleave off in ATP. We use that energy as energy, but the magnesium goes right into our urine. And that's the burn rate. And the faster the kinase is cleaving phosphate, the more stress you're under, the more you've got to deal with that stress by not just modifying your supplement routine, you got to modify your lifestyle.
Mhm.
Because if your body perceives that it's in constant chronic stress, it's going to start to shut down. It's going to produce more cortisol, which is going to trigger greater levels of metallothionein, which is a metal binding protein. And metallothionein binds up copper 1,000 times stronger than it binds up zinc. The kicker is zinc triggers the synthesis of metallothionein. I was talking to a woman yesterday, very talented, very switched on. She was taking 54 milligrams of zinc every day. I said, you got to stop that yesterday. I said, that's driving your copper into the ground, but you're binding it up and you can't do anything once it's bound up.
Mhm.
So people just need to learn the basics of how the body responds to stress and what impact it has on key minerals.
Do you recommend zinc at all? Because a lot of people are taking it for sex hormone conversion, obviously when they're feeling under the weather or sick or a sore throat.
I don't buy any of that. That's all contrived as far as I'm concerned. I know I sound like a heretic. The body, we get sufficient zinc from our diet. You should not be getting it from a bottle. The, the biggest problems with zinc are it blocks copper uptake. It kills the enzyme in the mitochondria to make energy, complex 4, and it kills the ferroxidase enzyme function that regulates iron. Those are 3 really good reasons not to take too much zinc. And so I just stay away from it.
You just get it
It's just
from
not worth
food.
it. And this idea that, oh, it stops viral replication. Yeah, that's true. Copper kills the virus. Why are we worrying about replication? Let's just get rid of it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's the distinction between copper and zinc.
You did mention the adrenals there, Morley. Where did the adrenals in the aspect of adrenal fatigue or dysfunction play into the management of iron, the recycling center, the ferritin, the copper, the whole lot? If someone has adrenal fatigue, what are they facing here?
Well, I think it's an overused expression. Like most people just have fatigue. And the real technical term for that is cellular energy deficiency. Fatigue is just the word we use. It's a shorthand word. We use that with our doctor. The number one reason why people go see their doctor is fatigue.
Mm.
The one thing that doctors are not taught in medical school, how to make energy. They don't know how energy is made. And I don't say that to be rude. They don't know. They don't know how it's made. There's a very precise process that the mitochondria go through to make energy, and it's just not taught in medical school. Why? Because you got to say the word copper. You can't make energy without copper. And the adrenals are sitting on top of the kidney, so it's adrenal. Adrenal is on top of the renal gland, and it's making a lot of hormones. It's also the storage depot for 95% of the whole food vitamin C, which has what at its core? Tyrosinase. Why is tyrosinase important? Because it's critically important for amine metabolism, but it's also important for colors. Uh, this idea that the only thing we have to worry about is hair color, skin color, and eye color is foolish. We got to worry about the organ color. Is my gallbladder green? Is my spleen purple? Is my heart red? Those are really important colors because they dictate the frequency and function of that organ. And if the spleen is supposed to be purple and it's showing up kind of a dull brown, it doesn't have the energy it needs. So the adrenals are abused, but they're responding to stress and they're squirting out adrenaline and cortisol nonstop. And they Tom Cowan noted. He was West Coast. I think he's now on the East Coast, but he's now retired. But a very, very respected clinician. He called adrenal fatigue fat deficiency syndrome.
Interesting.
What the adrenals love are minerals, especially the electrolytes, and magnesium and sodium and potassium in particular. The adrenals love whole food vitamin C, not ascorbic acid, whole food vitamin C that has the whole complex, that has the tyrosinase. And the adrenal glands need retinol. Back to that retinol thing again, because retinol is what makes copper bioavailable. And we're just not, we don't have a full understanding of how important retinol is in our day-to-day physiology.
Speaking of the fruit aspect, I
Right.
heard you discuss before that fructose is a consideration with uric acid and gout. And I have a couple of clients that have gout. Can
Yeah.
you touch on that a bit?
The expert that people can look into is Richard. His name is Rick, but Richard Johnson, Richard J. Johnson. He's at the University of Colorado in Denver. He's written many excellent articles.
Mm-hmm.
I met with him several years ago. It was 2 years ago in 2023. And I said, Rick, it seems to me if we're not making energy in our mitochondria, if we're not making ATP, we're making uric acid. He said, you're absolutely right. And so there's a recycling process in the mitochondria that people don't know about. The nucleotides need to be recycled. And what's happening with, if the body can't flip, it's going to start with ATP, it's going to get broken down to ADP, it's supposed to recycle back to ATP. There's a constant recycling process. If that recycling doesn't happen, the ADP becomes AMP. And then it becomes another derivative of that. And there's actually 7 different derivatives before it becomes uric acid. Uric acid is a complete failure of the mitochondria to make energy, to recycle the energy. And so what's happening as it goes from ATP to ADP to AMP, I'm embarrassed, I can't think of the components. Hold on, give me 2 seconds. Because I've got it all mapped out. Because it's absolutely amazing. Oops. So it goes from ADP to ADP to AMP, then it becomes IMP, then it becomes inosine, and then that becomes hypoxanthine, and then hypoxanthine becomes xanthine, and then it becomes uric acid.
Mm.
So it's multiple steps, and there are 3 places where copper can save the day. In fact, what I identified for Dr. Johnson was 14 places where copper was important to prevent uric acid. He was stunned. He said, I don't know anything about copper. I said, I know you don't. So someone who has uric acid has low copper, low ATP production, mitochondrial fatigue, and they probably have too much iron in their mitochondria.
Yeah.
And so the purpose of the mitochondria isn't just to make energy, it's to recycle iron, it's to recycle calcium, it's to recycle amino groups. It has many jobs. It's got to make heme, it's got to make iron sulfur clusters. It's a very busy little factory that happens to make energy, but it's not an energy factory. It's a factory making stuff. And people have been misled to think it just makes energy, when in fact it's very multifaceted.
So there's a thyroid issue there for sure. I believe there's an adrenaline issue as well with gout, especially as how it's impacted on the level of the liver, which is where copper has an important role as well. And we usually think of liver and kidney with gout.
Absolutely. So as soon as you are consuming high fructose corn syrup, you have a net loss of ATP. The fructose, the very first step of breaking down fructose, requires ATP. So you've just put the body into a deficit position. Then the fructose becomes what's called sorbitol. Well, sorbitol is a copper chelator. It chelates 98% of the copper around it. And so why are they using high fructose corn syrup as a sweetener? To lower our copper status. It is not rocket science. So it's just people have got to recognize that there are ancient mechanisms to preserve our homeostasis, and there many of them, most of them, are being violated by the modern farming and pharmaceutical and food system.
What is the role of copper, iron, and even magnesium in people who have a lot of physical pain from either rheumatoid arthritis or fibromyalgia or something like that?
Yeah. Again, we're back to there's a three-ring circuit that runs the body: copper, iron, and oxygen. And if those are not in proper regulation, magnesium is going to take it on the chin. And if magnesium's down, then calcium is going to rise. It's not a complicated process. In rheumatoid arthritis, you have a buildup of iron in the rheumatic fluid because there's insufficient ceruloplasmin in the blood to regulate the iron. And people with rheumatoid arthritis can have ferritins in the thousands. So there's a raging level of ferritin, but what that really means is the iron has been dumped in the lysosome of the liver, and what's being excreted into the blood is empty shotgun shells. The serum ferritin does not have iron in it, but the tissue that involves the joints is loaded with iron because there's not enough copper to properly regulate. With fibromyalgia, we've got, instead of rheumatoid tissue, we're dealing with a wide spectrum of connective tissue and muscles that are iron toxic, can't make energy, can't recycle the iron properly. It's the same mechanism, just in a different area. Why does ME or chronic fatigue arthritis and other? I have no idea. I don't know what that mechanism is, what swings it one way or the other, but it's the same mechanism. We're back to the same cast of characters: copper, iron, oxygen, magnesium, and the need for proper regulation.
So how much iron or magnesium approximately would a person with either, shall we say, an RA flare or fibromyalgia flare need? Like they're in a lot of physical pain every day. What are we kind of recommending to them in regards to copper and magnesium?
Well, the first thing I would do is make sure they're doing blood donations religiously, like every other month, to lower the iron footprint, which is causing their symptoms. The excess iron causes oxidative stress, which burns up the magnesium, and it's very hard on the copper and the ability to neutralize the copper. Again, at a baseline for magnesium, Selig's formula, 5 milligrams per pound. They probably are going to need 7 or 8 milligrams per pound because they're in so much distress. The pain receptors are all regulated by copper. Ding, ding, ding. That's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
And so if there's a lot of pain, then you've got to be managing the copper. And in the 30s, our ancestors used to get 4 to 6 milligrams of copper a day in their diet, in their natural diet. You can't find that much copper in the food today. So I think you're faced with supplements. I think Recuperate is a really good supplement in that regard. And it's 2 milligrams per capsule. So they might need at least three capsules. They might need 4 or 5 capsules to begin to reverse the confusion in the body.
So if copper regulates the pain receptors, how does copper regulate how we perceive pain, but also our emotions?
Well, I think magnesium has more to do with perception. I think Dr. Seeley wrote about that. So what you perceive as stress and what I perceive as stress are two different things.
Mm.
You know, what's bugging you might roll off my back and vice versa. But when we're under stress, we're wearing night vision binoculars, and the world starts to cave in, and our perception of the problem gets very narrow, but they're night vision goggles. Everything's bigger and brighter than it really is, especially when you're magnesium deficient. And that's the acute stress side. The chronic stress side is as the body perceives that the stress is not going to go away, it's going to start to take the person offline. So you don't seem to be able to handle your stress. Let's start taking you offline. That's really what's happening. It's not being demonic. It's trying to save you. So you can't seem to handle the stress. I can't keep up with the stress. And copper is essential for that ongoing process. Very, very important for the chronic stress management to have adequate copper in the diet.
Okay. Last question, Morley, because we're coming up on time. This one I've asked you before, but I want to wrap up with this question because it comes up time and time and time again. Is heavy menstrual bleeding? My doctor says I need iron. I'm bleeding out. What do you have to say on that?
Well, there's a wisdom to the body, and the body knows when it has too much iron. And so it takes advantage of situations where iron is leaving the body. So the only way to get rid of excess iron is to do blood donations or do menstrual cycles or cut yourself accidentally. And people don't know that. There is no enzymatic or hormonal mechanism to lower iron status in the human body. Blood loss, gravity-driven blood loss. And people don't know that and don't realize that a heavy menstrual cycle is the wisdom of the body saying, thank you, Lord, I can get rid of this excess iron. And the doctors don't realize how much iron is actually being lost. They think it's buckets, it's thimblefuls. And so then they recommend iron supplements or iron invasions to create this dependency on constantly having to bring iron into the body. And it was very well studied by Robert Hodges in 1979. And that infused iron, that invasion of iron, is good for 60 days. 6 weeks, actually. It's 6 weeks. It's not even 60 days. It's 6 weeks. And then suddenly the person needs another hit. And in 6 weeks, they need another hit. And in 6 weeks, they need another hit, not knowing that the iron is building in their tissue. And at some point, the body's going to say, hey, I got to get rid of it, or I'm going to start to create a lot of problems inside your body.
So iron supplements are a terrible idea, people.
Well, I take the position, I know I'm kind of alone in this. I don't truly believe that iron deficiency anemia exists unless you've been in a severe car accident. If you're having heavy menstrual loss, if you have heavy blood loss at the birth of the baby, Again, that's the wisdom of the body taking advantage of the circumstance. People with digestive issues, colitis, Crohn's, things like that. Again, they think they're jettisoning buckets. They're not. The body is just trying to get rid of this excess iron. And there's a complete myth understanding in conventional medical circles.
Okay. All right. Very, very, I swear this is the last question because I know you have to go. What's your opinion on large blood platelets? It showed up on a client's blood panel recently, and I said I would bring it up with you.
The person you want to look into is Dale Schuschke, Schuschke. He was a researcher at University of Kentucky. Brilliant, studied the microcirculation. Platelets are very, very important. It would suggest that the body is under stress, that it feels it needs to be primed for clotting. That's really what platelets are going to get involved in. And so there's some deficiency in the body to regulate the homeostasis of the blood, and it's defaulting into clotting. The other person you can look into, and I had a chance to do my presentation with him, is Douglas Kell from England. He's at the University of Liverpool, but he's written a lot about microcirculation, and that's really what platelets get involved in: clotting, strokes, things like that. And what I learned as he was presenting, I was trying to figure out, is there a more natural way to solve these clots? And there is. It's called ceruloplasmin, and it's the copper protein that regulates the body. And he was surprised to see that ceruloplasmin played that role in the body. So I would be willing to bet that someone with high platelets has low ceruloplasmin. That would be my theory.
So the body's experiencing a lot of stress. It's getting ready to clot should there be an emergency. But that would lead me to believe that there's also a very high level of inflammation as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, your instincts are right. And I have high platelets. I don't know whether it's genetic or not. I have no idea. I've got decent ceruloplasmin, but I don't have raging ceruloplasmin. It's in probably the mid-20s. But the Red Cross is always hammering me for my platelets, and I'll never do it. When you do blood donations, you only want to do natural, gravity-driven blood donation. You don't want to do power reds. You don't want to use plasma. You don't want to use platelets, because all of the non-gravity forms involve a machine where they put citrate in your blood, and citrate is very hard on ceruloplasmin.
Okay. All right. Brilliant, Morley. We knocked out pretty much all the questions there. Thank you.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad we had a chance to have this conversation.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Super helpful. Anything you want to add in? Good to go?
No, I just would say that for people who are looking to learn a little bit more about this, we do have an institute. We're in enrollment right now, looking for students, and very excited about this will be class number 22, as it's really shaping up nicely. But if people really have that need, go to rcp123.org, go to the resources tab, look for the institute, and then knock yourself out. In 16 weeks, you'll have a very different grasp of the problem.
Yeah, and I share all of your videos on Instagram as well, so I'll put the link and everything.
That'd be great.
Morley, it was a pleasure again.
And don't forget to send me that iron brew.
Iron brew. I'm going to get you some iron brew, and I'm going to send it to you. And hopefully it doesn't explode in the post or anything. Or I'll just drive it to your house. It'll be a road trip.
There you go. Right. Okay. It's just a slight drive from Calgary. But no, I look forward to getting that. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll just keep continuing the dialogue.
Yeah. I'll be in touch once I get my hands on it. All right. Thanks, Morley.
Okay. Thanks so much.